Hello and welcome to the big picture. The visit of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Nepal, the first in 17 years by an Indian Prime Minister, has caused a major buzz in both countries. The two-day visit, which saw a series of agreements being signed and also many potential agreements in the future being agreed upon. The visit is being dubbed as successful, going by the nature of response Prime Minister Modi received in Nepal from all the leaders from monarchists to Maoists. The Indian government advancing a soft loan of $1 billion, formation of border working group, decision to work out outstanding border dispute issues, and several assistance offered for the development of transport, tourism and highways have been welcomed by Nepal. The Indian Prime Minister has also agreed to revise the 1950 Treaty of Peace and Friendship, for which Nepalese government is expected to provide specific proposals soon. The Indo-Nepal relations, which has witnessed many ups and downs in the past, is however seen to be on the upward swing now. So has the Modi visit begun to reset the relations between the two countries, and what kind of revision can we expect in the Indo-Nepal peace treaty? We will discuss all this today with Professor S.D. Muni, Foreign Affairs Analyst, Sitaram Yechury, CPI-M leader in the Rajya Sabha, Bharat Bhushan, Senior Journalist, and we will be joined soon by other guests also. Welcome to all of you. Sitaram, you think that this was one of the probably the most successful visits by an Indian Prime Minister, because the last one in any case was 17 years ago and before that also?
Well, it has definitely come after a long break, but we must also understand that the long gap in the visit of an Indian Prime Minister to Nepal has also been due to the developments and conditions in Nepal. Since the palace tragedy of the last king of Nepal, I mean, after that, with the new monarch there in Nepal, I don't think there's been much of a possibility of any interactions of that nature, of this high level. And then after that, you had nearly a decade or more of insurgency in Nepal, and then finally the transition, which has been continued for 8 long years. So this degree of uncertainty, I think, is one of the factors. But nevertheless, the fact that the Indian Prime Minister went there and discussed all the contentious issues is a welcome step, and only hope that this would eventually result in something tangible that will emerge from this, and not mere expression of goodwill.
Professor Muni, would you see this as more than an expression of goodwill?
Well, there is an effort to, as you said, reset the relationship. And I think Prime Minister has done exceedingly well to address some of the very critical and I would say even sensitive issues. But, if you want to assess the visit, he has done a great deal to change the atmospherics of the relationship.
Right.
What happens in the atmospherics, how the promises made, the assurances given, hopes raised, will translate into reality remains to be seen, except in 1 or 2 areas, but major areas like hydropower or security or even in terms of treaty. This would depend upon 2 factors. One is, of course, the Indian bureaucracy and Indian decision making, because we are known world over for delivery deficit. We make promises which we do not deliver on. Even when we start a project, we take a long time. The second aspect would also be how the Nepalese politics shapes up. I have an uncanny suspicion that the Nepalese political theatre has still not evolved a consensus on how to deal with India. What kind of relationship they want? Do they want a developmental relationship? Do they want to hit nationalism with us? So these 2 factors will really decide to what extent the promises made would be delivered.
Bharat, very important point Professor Muni made. What kind of relationship does Nepal want with us? And with that kind of a fractured polity that we have witnessed in Nepal, you think that there can be any consensus on that in Nepal?
Well, I think there is a deep distrust of India, Indian diplomats, right, Indian bureaucracy in Nepal. I'm not saying it's always justified.
But it has been there.
It's been there. It's a small country syndrome, right, also. It's also true that we have always sort of behaved in a big brotherly fashion.
Or a little overbearing.
Yes, but that doesn't mean Nepal should look a gift horse in the mouth. You know, whatever India does in Nepal, positive things are often not recognized as such. I agree with Professor Muni that there is no consensus on how to deal with India. It's also equally true that although China pretends to be neutral in Nepal, they have cultivated people in established political parties there who keep on playing a balancing act. But leave that aside. On crucial issues like the 1950 treaty, if you read the 1950 treaty, it's entirely in favor of Nepal. And the Nepalese polity is not at all clear about what do they want renegotiated in that treaty.
Exactly.
The Nepali Congress doesn't want the 1950 treaty renegotiated. It was a demand made by the Maoists. But neither Prachanda nor Baburam Bhattarai have ever said which article of the treaty is inimical to the interests of Nepal.
In fact, even during the discussion with the Indian Prime Minister, they were not sure what they said. We will let you know.
Precisely. So, you know, I've gone through the treaty. I'm sure you've gone through the treaty. There are 2 letters exchanged with it. If there is any problem, then they should bring it out in the open. There's no point making an innuendo that's a bad treaty without saying what is bad about it.
And it's been there for 64 years.
You know, we achieved what Europe is achieving now in terms of open borders through stages. We did it more than 60 years ago. You want to rewrite that whole thing? Well, you know, Nepal is a sovereign country. Every Indian recognizes it as such. Be our guests. Take hydroelectric power. One of the things that the Prime Minister wanted to do was to sign a power trade agreement. Didn't happen. Forget the power trade agreement because that's got to do with pricing and how much electricity will be sold, although the Prime Minister made it very clear that only surplus electricity would be bought by India. The GMR agreement, the power development agreement for 900 megawatt Upper Karnali was not signed despite the business council, the investment
there were a lot of expectations, in fact, before the Prime Minister's visit that this particular thing will be signed.
So I'm saying forget the overarching agreement. You can have some doubts about it. India can clarify those doubts. But something as specific as the Upper Karnali Power Development Agreement, on which there seemed to be a consensus between the Indian side and the Nepalese side, then goes to the cabinet. And the cabinet refers it to a committee chaired by the vice chairman of the planning commission to figure out whether it will impact irrigation downstream. All this should have been done earlier.
Exactly. I think Sitaram wanted to. Yes, Sitaram.
Yeah, exactly. You see, the point is not really the content of the 1915 treaty. You see, if you look into the fine print of the 1915 treaty, there's very little you may want today to say that, tell us what is wrong. In fact, that is true. I mean, Nepal and the Nepal leader should tell us what is wrong or what is contentious as far as they are concerned. But remember that way back in late 1988, early 1989, there was a very big anti-India agitation that was there in Nepal. And at that time, this issue came up into a lot of contention. And then what was being discussed was specifically Clause 6 and Clause 7 of the treaty, where both the countries give equal treatment to its citizens in each other's country.
Right.
I mean, pertaining to everything, particularly trade and commerce.
Right.
Now, remember, this was entered into in 1950.
Right.
Like you correctly pointed out, 64 years have gone by. Now, situation has changed in both the countries, and in Nepal, you see the emergence of a certain corporate, sections, businessmen who would also want to safeguard their own territory. So, this equal treaty became unequal in the sense that India, being a vast country with more experienced corporate and business culture, etc., and that of commerce, and also the route to the sea, as far as Nepal is concerned.
Right.
There were all these problems that were concerning the commerce connected with third countries. Now, these are issues that I'm sure can be settled across the table. After all, remember, we have, after many years, in a similar exercise, some years ago, we have redrafted a new treaty with Bhutan.
Right.
And that has now been put into force some years ago, actually. So, it's perfectly possible to do that, but the question is to create an atmosphere whereby such discussions can take place.
Okay.
Otherwise, there's always a suspicion that they are being,
shortchanged.
I mean, to put it uncharitable expressions, like they are being looted, the resources are being looted, India is gaining greater advantage. Now, these are matters that I think need to be settled once and for all, rather than allowing them to fester as wounds.
Okay. Professor Muni, when they are talking of revising the treaty and things like that, that we should take the current realities into account. That's what they are saying, and I think the Indian delegation also was amenable to it. What are the current realities?
Well, may I go back to the treaty for a while? Frankly speaking, I do see there are elements of inequality. One, the signatories to the treaty. Prime Minister of Nepal signed...
When you're talking of inequalities in favor of India?
No. I am come to that.
Okay.
Just a minute. That it is signed by the Prime Minister, it is signed by the Indian Ambassador.
Right.
So the Nepalese say, how can an Indian Ambassador be equal to a Prime? But that's a non-issue to my mind. There are 4 other provisions which need to be discussed. One is the question of arms. The treaty says that whenever Nepal wants to buy arms, it will have to coordinate with India, because they mostly pass through India. There is a reason for that. But this now they are saying that it is unequal because we have to seek your permission and we have to depend upon you. Secondly, when it comes to harnessing Nepal's natural resources and industrial projects, the treaty very clearly stated in 1950 that preference will have to be given to the Indians from outside. Now they say, why only Indians? We can go to others. So this needs to be changed. The third one is, as Sita mentioned, about the question of treatment of each other's nationals. But there in treaty we accepted that for some time to come, which is not defined, that protection will be given to the Nepalese against unfair competition. So, because Indians are more developed, and therefore the inherently treaty is unequal against India, so far as it is written. And the fourth one is, it says that Nepal will not employ any foreign national if he or she is a threat to the security of India or Nepal. And this again, Nepal says that it's a kind of a pressure on us what to do, what not to do. Now, I think these are the 4. Now, current reality is that most of the uncomfortable provisions in the treaty for the Nepalese have been eroded by the Nepalese very successfully. Therefore, whatever they have gone and bought arms from wherever they wanted. Of course, there are restraints, but they have done it. They, in harnessing natural resources, they allow anybody which they want to. They employ any foreigner which they want to. Therefore, this current reality, I think, when it comes on the table, would be very hard for the Nepalese to define. That is why to define. That's why they don't define what they want. Because they want all the advantages without looking at the concerns which India has, primarily in the security matters.
Yes, Sitaram?
No, there's a point in what Professor Muni is saying, and that is the issue that can be settled only when you sit down to talking across the table. And it is true that I don't know if there's anybody in Nepal who's put much thought to it, or what sort of amendments they want. I don't think they've gone down to these nitty-gritties yet. It's just a sentimental thing that's saying that a big brother versus a small brother who's been taken for granted all the while. Now this, I think, this Prime Minister's visit would to some extent try and assuage that, but then they would expect something tangible. And if that tangible has to happen, I think some mechanisms have to be put in place. And I think that's sort of a follow-up action. We have not heard of it, but I hope that is something that should emerge.
The two foreign secretaries are supposed to meet on this issue and carry this forward. But before that, they have to first put on the table what is it that they want to be revised in the treaty. Anyway, we'll come to that.
What is the agenda?
Right, Bharat. But the thing is that the Nepalese government, Nepal itself is going through trauma virtually to bring, create a constitution of its own. Where does India stand in that scheme?
I'll just answer that question.
Because Prime Minister Narendra Modi has made it very clear that, we don't want to interfere in your internal affairs. We don't want, you please do what you want.
One sentence before that. One sentence I would like to say in relation to the earlier things. If the treaty is negotiated, it cannot be only those clauses which don't suit the Nepalese that will be renegotiated. If we talk of equal treatment,
Nepalese.
And if I were a jingoistic
true.
nationalist, I would say,
That is
you know,
right.
what has happened to Nepalese migration to India because of equal treatment. The entire eastern Himalayas, the lingua franca today is
Nepalese.
The politics of India's northeast is changing because of Nepalese migration. So yes, let us renegotiate everything, but then every portion of the treaty has to be renegotiated.
So
there's a provision for it. There's a provision for it.
No,
It's
are you
perfectly
saying that
legitimate.
are you saying that it would open a Pandora's box?
No, it won't. I think both countries have grown up in the last 10 years. Everything should be negotiated. All I'm saying is only those things that are uncomfortable to the Nepalese or a section of the Nepalese, they should not form the total agenda. Entire treaty should be negotiated. Every aspect of it, including equal treatment and aspects of equal treatment.
And Nepalese would find it difficult to do so. That's
Exactly.
all I'm saying. Yes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
coming to the constitution making itself, that
That is the thing.
We are saying that, you know, we will maintain neutrality as far as the constitution making is concerned. You know, you please do what you want. Is that a practical thing?
Absolutely. That is the only thing we should do. We should not interfere in their constitution making. Let them fight their own internal ethnic battles, their battles about who comes from the hills and who comes from the plains, how their state should be carved. If we interfere in that, then the Nepalese and those people who are inimical to India would have been proven right that India interferes in our matters.
Right.
They should they should write their own constitution, and most of it is written. It's all only about form of government. Should it be federal? Should it be prime ministerial, presidential, mixed? And which way should the state be carved? According to ethnicities, should they be top down so that you have hill people and, you know, mid hills people and plains people in every state? It's their local business. It's an internal matter of Nepal. We should leave it at that.
Professor Muni.
Well, I again have a slightly different tone on this. You know, India has a perception of what kind of neighborhood we want politically.
Right.
We don't want a polarizing neighborhood or polities in the neighborhood which are polarizing. We don't want extremist polities in the neighborhood, because we will have to suffer and take the spillover of the consequences of that. Therefore, broadly, in terms of broad parameter, for instance, in Bangladesh, we stood by the democratic and reasonably secular kind of a or moderate kind of a setup. Similarly, in Nepal, and this is where Prime Minister, while saying rightly, as Bharat has said, that we don't want to interfere into your affairs, but these are the broad parameters in which we want your constitution to evolve. And he said something very clearly, abundantly clearly, that both the world and India has a stake in the kind of constitution which you are going to evolve. So let us make no mistake that so far as polity in Nepal or other neighbors are concerned, we have certain preferences, and we would like to pursue those preferences as amicably, as friendly manner as
without being
possible.
seen as overbearing or trying to impose our views on.
And I may here underline, for instance, Mr. Modi used 3 words for the Nepalese polity. He said federal, democratic, republic. I wish he had also added secular. He did not. He did not. Which may be his own preference or whatever else it is. Because I want to underline, the Hindu polity of Nepal is only a product of 1962. For 200 years before that, Nepal remained a Hindu society, but not a Hindu state.
Right.
So let it not become a Hindu state again.
Sitaram, what do you think India should be doing? You know,
I agree.
maintaining neutrality. Is it possible to maintain
Bhushan.
neutrality?
No, you see, the point is that there are certain very open interests that India has. And in fact, I think this opinion has been conveyed to everybody in the Nepali leadership, in the wide spectrum of that leadership, that what would be a general preference for India and for the region would be a secular, democratic, federal republic.
Right.
Now, this is the lines on which the Constitution Committee actually was constituted. The draft has been, I think much of it has been ready. The contentious issue of how does this federalism become operable, what is the division of the states. They went through the whole exercise of studying also how we have formed the linguistic reorganization of states, how ethnicity alone could also have the danger of leading to separatism, etc. All these have been discussed in the civil society in Nepal. But the point is that it has to be brought to the final crunch.
Right.
Now that is something that has just not been happening during the last 8 years. Now that is what, if at all the Prime Minister has urged them to do something, is to rightly and correctly hasten up this process. But I think the broad outline of what India would like there to be there in Nepal, as well as in all our neighbors, including Pakistan, Bangladesh, etc., is a secular democratic republic. And that, I suppose, is fair enough to say we are not imposing ourselves on them. But that is the general milieu in the Indian subcontinent that should dominate.
Okay, Bharat.
I'm not as hopeful as Sita of pushing our agenda in Pakistan, of the Pakistan becoming secular. But in Nepal, federalism, democracy,
what we wish. What we wish is.
Yeah, we may wish, but
what we wish is what.
Wishes for horses, yeah. But I'm saying the agenda of federalism, democracy, Nepal being a republic, Nepal being a secular republic, all this has already been agreed. If this is what India wants, it's already there in the draft constitution, as Sita has pointed out. The critical issue really is, as he said, operationalization of that federal structure, the structure of the state. And in that, if Dr. Muni thinks that India can help, maybe he would like to say something. I don't know whether we can help in making, operationalizing Nepalese federalism in any way.
I never meant getting into the nitty-gritties.
The Prime Minister
but
has...
the broad framework, the pillars
agreed.
of the constitution.
Those are already agreed, aren't they?
Well, mostly. There is a debate. There is still a debate, at least as I mentioned on the federal, because you remember, and I'm praising the Prime Minister for having said that. He said, आप एक ऐसा गुलदस्ता बनाइए जिसमें हर छोटे फूल की महक भी आए. What does it mean? Right. He said means every small community group must feel an owner of that constitution.
Right.
And if you don't give that feeling, a constitution which is not acceptable to all the communities in Nepal will not be a constitution.
No, Professor Muni, my question is this. Is there any leverage or scope for India to, at any point of time during the formation of the constitution, when they finally decide that this is going to be the shape of it, for us to interfere in any way or very gently advise them in any way?
As a friend, we can talk. I agree with you. There is no scope for interference. There is no scope for dictating. There is no scope for drafting a constitution for them. But don't forget, Prime Minister Modi gave them two CDs on the Indian constitution to tell them how we have tackled some of these issues.
Absolutely.
So good practices can be shared.
Good practices, Sitaram, Samvidhan, the making of the Indian constitution by Shyam Benegal, which was aired on our television.
Absolutely. And
you think that was a hint that you people please have a look at this, learn from how we made our constitution?
Indeed, absolutely. I think that was a hint, and I think this hint has been given to the Nepali political leadership for during the last 8 years by various people who have been talking to them, including Prof. Muni and Bharat Bhushan themselves.
Right.
The point at issue is that they have to come to an agreement between them as to how this federal structure and the state structure would evolve. Now, that is where I think if they are most welcome, and I think India should offer, if you want consultations, if you want constitutional experts, if you want to see how our constitution worked over the period of time to learn from the mistakes. Remember, when they made a constitution in 1990, they learned from our mistake. In our constitution, there is a grey area when nobody gets a majority in the parliament following an election.
Right.
In Nepal, they put it very clearly. They stipulated that the single largest party, in that case, even though it may not have a majority, but the single largest party will form the government.
Right.
So, I mean, it's not that they've not learned from these experiences. But if they want to, we can. But the point is very clear. No interference whatsoever.
Okay. Professor Muni, the kind of $1 billion being offered as soft loan, this donation to the Pashupatinath temple and things like that. You think these are the kind of atmospherics which the Nepalese people would appreciate?
No, I think they are being appreciated, and this should have been done, because if India has capacities in certain areas, it must offer it to Nepal, and if Nepal has anything which it can offer to India, that is most welcome. recall Mr. Modi's that statement that आने वाले 5 साल में हम आपको बिजली देंगे, 10 साल के बाद में आप हमें रोशन कीजिए, हमारे अंधेरे को रोशन कीजिए. It's an interdependence. And so far as soft loans are concerned, Nepal is not the first case. India has, and this is not for the first time that India has offered it. India has all along been doing to the developing countries, including.
Is this the biggest?
Including Indo-China.
Is this the one-time biggest?
But this is one of the biggest offer which has been made and tied up in a way. Not tied is a bad word, but to hydropower and infrastructure. That it is not that $1 billion you can take money and use it anywhere. No way. You use it for infrastructure, you use it for hydropower.
Bharat?
I think
Pashupatinath, visit of how important is this? Because we right through last several years, several decades, we have seen that BJP as a party has always been close to people in Nepal because of its. Has that helped in creating a better rapport between Modi and the leaders there?
Probably, but I'm saying that this rapport has always been there. India has no problem accepting Nepal as an independent country, a sovereign country, but which is civilizationally part of India. So that those civilizational links are what make our relationship so close. It hasn't happened that any Prime Minister of India has gone and done Rudrabhishek at Pashupatinath temple. Mr. Modi wants to do it. I, as a secularist, may have some objection to it that he should have gone in his personal capacity and done it, not as Prime Minister of India, but that's my personal view. However, I think that he did it has gone down very well with the people of Nepal because they're deeply religious people and they say, oh, this man is just like us. So that's very well. But I'm saying that what we need to do with Nepal is much more. What India does often doesn't get seen visually. If you go there, people will say, oh, this conference center was built by the Chinese. India gives grants for maintaining beer hospitals, setting up a library, maintenance of roads.
It doesn't get... Yeah, Sitaram, very quickly, these visits, these kind of visits to a temple or things like that, you think these are all part of the atmospherics which actually helps improve relations?
Well, I'm not too sure about it, but I think I agree with Bharat in terms of saying that as the Prime Minister, whether he should have gone and done his Rudrabhishekam, but personally is most welcome. No, that is a matter on which we have disputes back in India, and we are very clear on that matter. Now, these gestures have always taken place there, Girish. I mean, whenever any head of the state goes there, including Jyoti Basu, not as the head of the state, but as the Chief Minister of West Bengal, when he was on a state visit to Nepal, he visited the Pashupatinath because that is part of the official itinerary that the Nepal government would like you to go and visit. So, I mean, these are all part of the, what you call the state protocols. Like any foreign dignitary coming to India or coming to New Delhi will go to the Rajghat.
Absolutely.
I mean, he may agree or disagree with Mahatma Gandhi's views, but then that's part of the protocol. So, so that is a part. So, it's nothing new, that sort of thing happening. But the question is that whether it should have been done so openly in that sense, and that is what, I mean, conveys another impression.
Okay, yes, I'll come to
I only want to say that there are 3 or 4 things that India needs to do if it really wants to improve ties. I think we should offer to build that new parliament building to their design, but pay for it, so that people can say that the greatest democracy in the world has gifted us a parliament building. We should make sure that Nepalese students are not charged dollar fee here as they are being charged currently. They should be charged rupee fee.
Right.
And bring Nepalese students back to India. They're going off to China, Bangladesh, elsewhere.
I think that has been done.
And we should increase the number of scholarships for Nepalese students for higher education in India.
Okay, very quickly,
We should keep in mind that assertion of Hindu identity in Nepal, on the one hand, it appeals to many people. On the other hand, it also alienates some people.
Okay.
There are people who don't want Hindu state.
It's very interesting that Mr. Modi didn't meet the former king of Nepal.
No, that's a king is separate from Hindu. Small point. Sushma Swaraj was asked whether you will help Nepal to become a Hindu state, and she said, "I come from a secular state. This is not my work."
Okay. I think on that note we need to end, but but all my panelists agree that the visit of Prime Minister Modi to Nepal should start resetting the relation between the 2 countries. But as far as the treaty is concerned, how it can be reset or how it can be reshuffled. Nobody seems to be sure, but we'll wait and watch how it develops. Thanks to all my guests, Sitaram, Yechury, Professor Muni and Bharat, Bhushan. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue in the big picture, same time tomorrow.